Hugh, what's your angle on the kind of musician or composer, director, artistic vision from the filmmaker relationship? How do you see it working, and what kind of overview do you have?
To be honest, a lot of my experience as a publisher placing music was usually with tracks that existed. So this is working on a higher artistic level than I worked on. And also, I mean, I think that's changed a lot though with bands, because also it got to the point where you would be going there with the support of a label, or you might be able to go to a filmmaker or to the company a lot of the time. And sometimes you wouldn't really have a relationship with the director, and it would be about the story behind the group as much as the music, in terms of what support the label were going to put into, the new campaign and stuff. I think that's obviously, as with so many things in the music industry, it's kind of gone to dust. I'm kind of interested to see recently with things like you can see on that Submarine movie, which was shot in Wales recently, where obviously the director had a relationship with Alex Turner from Arctic Monkeys, and instead of, he's actually come up with 5 or 6 brand new songs for the film. So I don't know if that's actually a way, for as you said, a lot of people here in groups of actually getting into film these days.
What, actually try and make friendships with filmmakers or TV?
I think at a grassroots level, yeah. I mean, it's even, making, finding a local film school and getting involved. I've certainly done that with some younger directors and bands, yeah, and pairing them up.
Sure, and I suppose in terms of just practicing, it might be quite fun just to make little films yourselves, or put your music to other people's films just for practice, see how things work, and just play around like that.
Yeah, that's quite a good idea, actually. You can obviously, with all the tools that are, because things have changed so much, all the tools available to everyone here today, you can do that on YouTube or whatever. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Caroline, you have a company or work for a company that places music in films. What do you mostly do? Do you sort of operate with placing tracks, as Hugh's talking about, and a lot of people here would be interested in, or Paul Leonard Morgan, for instance, is a composer. Who do you work with mostly, and what do you do?
Mostly it's bespoke music, like Eleanor was saying. That's what is the kind of the wish. If you've got the budget for it, that's ideally what everyone wants, because that way you get something tailor-made that matches exactly to what you want the film to be, and that's you're both trying to work together to make the best thing possible. And sometimes budgets just don't allow that, so we'll have library music, or might have a production music that we can use or give, or similarly we'll have phone calls from people saying, I can't get hold of this track, I want this delmeter track on my film and I don't know where to go, and you help them kind of source that and get permissions for it and stuff. And with bands and things, there's certain bands that just now I am placing them more in advertising and TV use as opposed to soundtrack use. So kind of, TV adverts here and mainly in America, because it goes down really well there, before they get placed in films. That's usually a music supervisor role in a studio. So for instance, the film we've just finished, Limitless, with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro, we scored the whole soundtrack, and about 20% of that entire duration film is commercial tracks. And so when you look at the list of all the tracks this music supervisor had to go and source and license and go through all the rigmarole of going to each an individual publisher and get the permissions to use it, and can we use it in that scene? Is it too sexual? Is it too this? Blah, blah, blah. It's a minefield. So for somebody who's maybe working in a slightly smaller scale film, it's too much hassle, effectively. And you do want to just, it's usually coming at the end of the entire creative process of making a film. The music's the last thing to go on. As Eleanor said, you've filmed it, you've cut it, you've edited it, you pass it over, and it's the icing on the cake, essentially. So usually you're right at the very end of this entire, maybe year-long journey, and you want it to be done, but you also don't want to fuck it up. It's the crux of it. So having the time at that point in the stage to then go and start going to different publishers is sometimes problematic. So we try and help out. If it's our music, if it's bits of our music and somebody else's music, can we help you get their music to try and just make it all fit?
Do you represent bands specifically? For instance, if people in the audience today came up and gave you some demos and stuff, you really liked their music, would you then sort of take them under your wing as a company? Are there like a handful of bands or dozens of bands that you kind of go to when you need a song for a film?
I'm always on the lookout for good music. As Stuart had said in the last panel, he's like, if you email me stuff and it's shit, you're not going to hear back from me. I try and email back and go, thank you very much for that. That's lovely. I'll keep that in file. I don't want to say you're shit. I'm never going to use that. Majority of the bands that you do get stuff from, you think, that's really good. However, the production quality, the actual sound recording quality, isn't high enough for me to place that as it is into any kind of advertising or onto broadcast. It's not broadcast quality, basically, which is a shame because you can't say to that band, look, I'm going to give you money to record that in a better high standard so we can use it.
It's kind of up to the band.
It's up to them to do it. But if anybody was here and said, oh, I've got some really good stuff and it is really high production quality, then yeah, I'll happily have that. And I'll say to right, I will pitch this for you for different advertising things. If anything comes up, we'll then discuss what the deal will be. So yeah, I'm always more than happy to get it. It's just difficult to get it.
Well, let's talk about the actual quality then. What are you looking for? I mean, Malcolm, you're obviously well versed in this. What kind of level of quality does a production company or a film company need? Without going into too much of the techie side of it, but okay. I mean,
well, what I guess the journey I've been on is that you start off with an ambition to compose music for film, and then you end up, as well as doing that, running a professional studio and a mastering studio as well. So your music has to be of the highest quality. If there's any sound defects at all, people just won't put up with it. And what I tend to do when I'm working is that at the moment when I write the material, I'll actually mix it for broadcast, which sounds a bit crazy. But you're actually there in the moment, you're writing something that might never get used, but it's much easier to mix it to a really high standard and get it absolutely perfect. Then send it down to the film company for inclusion or rejection.
Do you use outside studios? I mean, you've mentioned that you have your own setup and so on. Would you ever use a big established studio to do something like this, or do you think you can do it
only
with
if I'm,
laptops?
say, recording a string section? So physically, you can't get them in a nice enough acoustic space in your own home to record them. But otherwise, I have a fair size studio in my home, and it's done most things. I've done most things there.
So it's basically when you say you mix it to the highest quality, what does that mean? I mean, Eleanor, what are you looking for from a composer or a band that are submitting their track to your film? I mean, how high does the quality have to be? I mean, do you just need MP3s and WAVs and this kind of stuff?
I'm not the film editor who, basically the film editor who's cutting the film will basically liaise technically with the composer, and then they will import a file. It could be it could be WAVs, it could be OMPFs, it could be, I mean, depending on what system basically the editor is working on, they'll probably import the soundtrack back in. And then we'll go to a post-production house to actually lay it on finally and make master copies. So it has to be, and it'll be monitored continually for broadcasting. I mean, for instance, if it goes above a certain kind of level, if they detect any kind of faults whatsoever, the whole thing's rejected and have to be remixed again. Especially if you're working for the BBC, there's an enormous amount of technical procedures. Certainly HD has caused a lot of trouble because nobody can quite agree on how high, and I mean, I know of things that have had to be laid back 20 times, and so a lot of the technological changes are quite difficult for people to keep up with, to know exactly what broadcasters are looking for. But I wanted to go back to a point that Caroline was making about, when you're placing tracks. Certainly when I was at the BBC, what I did as a program maker, if I wanted to use a certain track, and I was always looking obviously for more obscure stuff, because you don't want, I mean, how many times have we heard Arvo Pärt on, every other program? So, although I have to confess I have used him, but I didn't know he was so popular then. It was a long time ago. But you're constantly looking for, I mean, I'm looking for stuff that is original. If I can't actually get it composed, I want to find stuff that is quite obscure, that is quite interesting, that is quite sort of off the wall. But often, if you go through the BBC department that clears the music, if they haven't heard of that label, or if they haven't had that music cleared, they'll just say it's not clearable. because they can't really be bothered trying to find out who it is. I mean, basically, if it's not on their database, then you just don't exist. So it's a good idea for those of you out there to make sure that the BBC know that you exist, know what label you're working with, so they don't have any hassle, because that tends to be what production...
It's actually easier for unsigned bands in many ways, who are unsigned, unpublished and so on, to have their music placed in films and TV programmes, because there is less rigmarole to go through. That if you're trying to play something that's on EMI or Universal or whatever, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to put it in your film. I mean, Caroline?
Definitely. It's not so much that it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but like Eleanor says, it's a kind of case of computer says no. They don't really want to go through the hassle. Because it can be quite problematic. It can be a really long, drawn-out process, and it takes ages for publishers to get back to you. So a lot of the time for us, it's really short timescales we're working to. I'll get a brief in, and it's a US brief that I need to have finished effectively by the end of my working day to hit their deadline, which is the middle of our night. So I have to go through my kind of roster and go, right, that one. Okay, send it. So they don't... It's more hassle if I say, well, I can send that, but they're actually with that company, so you need to kind of give me a bit more information about it before I can clear that, before I can really send you it. If people are completely unsigned, they've not got a publishing deal or anything, they are just, here's my music. If you like it, great. It's so much simpler, and it really, the American market we find are very cut and dry, and it needs to be quick, easy, and very accessible. And
legal. I mean, obviously the BBC can't be getting into a situation where they're using stuff, you've said, use it, for free. They have to be seen, obviously, public service broadcaster. All the paperwork has to be absolutely kind of rock solid. So anything that's a bit tricky, it can fall through the system. So often that is why you hear the same tracks used over and over, because they're dead easy to clear. But it would be nice to see, I think, a lot, because there's a huge demand out there. I mean, if you think about the amount of programs that are being made, and also budgets are being massively slashed. Where's the first place they slash a budget? It will be the composer, because that's it's optional. So there's a rising demand for more and more music out there that is original, that is in a way pliable and slightly plastic. I don't mean bland, but it's the kind of stuff that would work with visuals, because I also think that the other thing is that film music's very specific. It shouldn't be 100%. It should be 50%. It has to be slightly empty so that the images can kind of complement it. And often, I think when music doesn't work, it's because the music itself is too complete, it's too full. So I think it's also a good idea to think slightly differently as well about the kind of music that you might be writing for picture.
Okay, Hugh, when bands are trying to, say, pitch their music for TV or film, do you think it's important to go through a company like Rage, for example? I
think I was going to pick up on that, actually. There's two things. I think it's not impossible for unsigned groups to get placed, particularly on TV shows. And I think there was a trend in the UK a few years ago, shows like Teachers on Channel 4. I think all their music was kind of ostensibly unsigned.
I think Skins is still doing stuff like that, In-Betweeners sort of and so on.
I think even in the States on a higher level, but... I think on a practical level for groups, that obviously you need to do as much searching as you can to find out what companies are actually possibly sourcing, unsigned groups. But there's I think a company called Woodwork Music, run by a woman called Rachel Wood, who came out of a dance label in Manchester, who's actually fantastic at placing things on adverts. Now, she's, only works with a handful of groups, but she's a real music person, and I think quite often has picked up on unsigned things, which have then gone on to, to get deals and the rest of it as well. And also, one thing we're not talking about here, certainly for new groups, is that it's potentially an income stream as well.
This is where I'm going next.
Can I say one more thing as well? Because I do have to leave at 4:20.
He does indeed have to leave, so he's not being rude and going, fuck you, Galloway, I'm off. He's got to catch a plane.
Is that because we're in Scotland? My perception is that there's a lot of TV companies up here in production, and is that not right?
It's getting smaller.
Okay, there was. Okay, but I'm talking about on a grassroots level because I'm based in Wales. There's the luxury of the fourth channel there is a Welsh language channel, but it became really important is that all those groups that came through that scene, particularly the Welsh speaking groups like Catatonia, Gorkies, Super Furries, all made a lot of money at an early stage from getting on all those shows. And I had one band actually where we really pushed it hard with not on a profile level, it was purely on a mercenary, there was money to be made.